Thank you. Thanks for being here, everybody. I'm a board member of EarlystART, a past board chair, and a grandma to 2 graduates and 2 current students at the St. Mark Center.
Hi, I'm Rebecca James, Vice Chair of the board, and I'd like to thank all of you for taking your seat at the table here. Thanks.
All right, well, let's go on ahead and get going. It's a really busy time, and we thank you for taking time to join us. The table's been set for everyone, and we just wanted to give you an update in conjunction with the communication we provided regarding our consolidation plan for this upcoming school year. Want to go ahead and go to the next slide for me, all right? So I think it'd be really helpful if I just contextualize things based on the region and what's going on in early childhood as a whole. There's currently capacity in our region for only 50% of our children. So that's like 1 in 5 children to be served. If you recall, during Sly James's time in office, it was a 1 in 4 children that were eligible for a Head Start service were being served when we were trying to get the pre-K tax pen passed. Since that time, there have been many providers that have been in similar situations to EarlystART that have actually closed their doors or reduced their operations. And so we've actually gone backwards as a community in our ability to enroll and serve all the children throughout the Kansas City metropolitan area. Not unique to Kansas City, but I'm sharing more Kansas City regional specific information. As in terms of supply and demand, there's about 128,000 children under the age of 5 that are in need of care. But right now there's only 65,000 spaces available in our area. So as we begin to get more into what's going on with EarlystART, I just wanted you to know that this is not, EarlystART is not the only place having these problems. Everyone is addressing them differently, and we have adopted an approach that, while painful, is what we think is going to be best for us as we work to rebuild. Next slide. So why are we having the crisis we're having? As school districts have continued to expand their offerings of preschool programming, we're in fierce competition with them. But we're also in competitions with industries like food service and manufacturing and other places that have higher wages than the early care and education system does. Additionally, school districts have attractive benefit offerings that a community-based nonprofit like ours is just not able to compete with. And while I'm grateful that be supported by a board that has allowed us to increase our wages, and we do have a pretty decent benefits package, we'll never be able to compete with the retirement system that the school district offers, for instance. There have been ongoing closures and overtaxing of the industry that really were exacerbated during COVID-19. Significant numbers of underqualified staff without having access to a really sustained professional development pathway for them. And that has resulted in, we've had more rapid turnover as we've hired than we ever experienced in the past. And that in turn has compromised our ability to ensure quality instruction and the true kindergarten preparedness that we're hoping for. There's limited trainings that meet the professional development needs of staff that are also reflective of their lived experience and time constraints. Some of you have heard about starting early. Dr. Astia Foster will talk here in a little bit more about some of the things we'll be doing and have already started doing under that umbrella, but that is one attempt to remove that challenge that we see that exists. Also addressing the community need for increased access. We acquired our two centers, Metro and North Center, as a result of other programs that had closed. If you weren't aware, Metro Center was previously operated by the YMCA, and it was vacant for more than 18 months before we assumed operations. Easter Seals Midwest operated in the Northland, and they gave a very short notice to that they were going to discontinue their Head Start agreement with that facility. And so we stepped up to the plate, probably a little naively, as it relates to acquiring additional programming, and really had no idea how challenging it was going to become to attract and retain the staff we need. The other thing, most of you on the call today are funders. Most of the funding outside of private philanthropic dollars that we see continues to have an emphasis on program expansion with little to no support to address staffing needs and operational structure. So it's a lot about, hey, we want you to add more kids, without really giving thought to, well, where are the people going to be to care for those kids that we are now wanting to add? Go ahead to the next slide. So really just putting some real specificity to our numbers. This year, we have had significant vacancies in our student enrollment that'll be directly tied into the next slide. You'll see about staff, but we're only running at about 47%. We got about 47% of the spaces that are vacant at Metro currently, 38% at St. Mark, and 15% at North. And it breaks down what, we got at full capacity. We're able to serve a little over 300 children in all three of our buildings. In our consolidated plan, this year, as of today, we're at 179 children currently enrolled. In our consolidated effort, you'll see, obviously, that would leave 100% of the vacant slots vacant at Metro next year, but we'll actually increase our enrollment slightly to 196 children total. What that really means is that all of the classrooms at St. Mark and all of the classrooms at North will be open. Also, for context, that one classroom at North that's currently not operating has not been open under our leadership, simply because we haven't acquired teachers to operate that additional classroom. And so really a lot of what we're doing is moving the table around a little bit and moving from 3 partial programs to 2 whole programs based on the staff that we currently have available, which takes me to the next slide. And please feel free to, if it's easier for you to take yourself off mute, go ahead or type in the chat. I don't mind being interrupted. I don't think we'll be here the full hour and a half. But of course, we love to visit with our friends, and we're happy to stay on for the whole time as well. But we currently have 36 staff vacancies throughout the agency. And that, I'm sorry, I'm looking at this. Normally I have our CFO who had a conflict today present numbers. I hate presenting numbers, but we have a total capacity of 65 staff. And this is broken down more within that direct education staff. We're not talking about fundraising team. We're not talking about administrative team. We're talking more directly about classroom teaching staff. And so we're looking at, we'll have, I don't know the easiest way to say it. Basically, we're moving the staff we have over into the other that are currently at Metro over to St. Mark, so that the classrooms that aren't fully staffed will be fully staffed. And that will enable us to serve the increased number of children. Mariah is going to speak briefly about fundraising and funding challenges.
Sure. I have the pleasure of seeing most of you quite a bit, so I'll keep it as brief as possible. But the continued funding need is very, very present. I would be remiss to discuss that as the Director of Development for the organization. And while we're making the commitment to serve as many, if not a few more children this year, we also have those increased operational costs associated with helping to rebuild the workforce that we have and further developing staff. This paired with the reduction of funding that you can see here on the screen means that sustainable support is more essential than ever before. I'd also be remiss if I didn't thank everyone on the call, particularly our community partners and funders, for continuing to support our work. And then also asking you to continue sustaining the organization through these transitions that we're making, which were not made lightly. And we are really hoping that we can get some quality teachers in the door so that way we can be able to serve even more children in the days to come.
Raina is gonna speak a little bit to some of the current challenges we're having, and as well as some of the explicit plans that we have in this year to come.
Yeah. So Deidre hit some of these points earlier about the low staffing that we're not just experiencing here at Early Start, but just across the board with teachers. So with low staffing, of course, that creates additional responsibilities and definitely leads to burnout for teachers and for the education and support staff, because they're kind of doing double duty at times. So the operational strain of the 3 facilities that are only partially staffed and partially enrolled, it just would make it more sustainable if, like we said, combining St. Mark and Metro to make it one full program, and then supporting our North location. We still have a few vacancies there, but of course we're in the process of definitely hiring and recruiting for those positions. The inexperienced teachers make it difficult to conduct teacher training due to the low staffing. So we want to focus more on teacher training and development, which Ms. Asia will talk a little bit about that later, about how we're going to develop more training plans for teachers and that professional development piece. And then we're being unable to be fully enrolled with students just due to the insignificant and insufficient staffing. Some changes, of course, is the reduction in the pre-K co-op partnership so that we can fully enroll Head Start children because we are, of course, low staff, we haven't been able to serve all of our Head Start children, and we want to be able to serve the children with the most needs in this area. We are combining Metro and St. Mark, which we're combining our staff and our current students that are enrolled to make one center, starting early, and teacher administrative training will be conducted at Metro Center. So this will be a center that will still stay open for teacher training and development. And of course, we have immediate hiring needs of our center director at North Center. Okay.
So I'm pleased to introduce, we have a new Chief of Human Resources that's gonna speak to us a little bit about some of the efforts we plan to take in the area of recruitment. June McDaniel. You're on mute.
All right, unmuted. Thank you, Deidre. Yes, I am June McDaniel, the latest new hire as the new CHRO for Early Start. I am currently in my 4th week. So as you can imagine, I am still drinking from the fire hose, but of the many HR initiatives that are currently on my plate, building a robust recruiting and retention strategy is certainly at the top of my list as a priority. So right now, just still doing a little bit of research. I'm in the process of reviewing our current recruiting practices, our marketing strategies around recruiting, some of the recruiting tools, maybe some different tools, reviewing our brand and what can we do to more promote Early Start out there, building relationships with some of our local colleges, partnering with ASIA to create some KPIs and competencies for our early educators, as well as internal development and strategies, building that with ASIA and RENA. So there's a lot more to come on that front. This is going to take a little bit of time, but we're certainly building toward that, building out that robust plan for recruitment as well as retention.
And if I would be remiss if I didn't just really fully acknowledge recruitment is not in the past been something we've really had to do. And we're not like K-12 districts that are traveling to college fairs in other states and going to look for teachers. And then as we added in the pre-K cooperative and needed certified teachers in those classrooms, we quickly, thank you to the Sherman Family Foundation and School Smart KC, we were able to get 2 certified teachers that started this year that came out of the Kansas City Teacher Residency Program and were funded by those 2 entities. However, without more specific strategies that we begin to employ, we're kind of behind the 8 ball. And then as everybody is aware, K-12 was fighting to find teachers as well. And so it's going to take a different use of some of our resources to build out a recruitment and marketing and advertising strategy that is just not something Early Start and most early childhood providers have done in the past. And before Asia speaks, I'll just also say that having multiple facilities now, we also have a more glaring awareness of the need to really tighten up and strengthen our onboarding process for new teachers and to have that new teacher and ongoing development plan and process in place as well. So Raina and June will be working in coordination on that. Asia, I'd love for you to speak about efforts under Starting Early and the Early Learning Career Academy.
All right, well, hello, I'm Asia and I'm the Chief Innovations Officer here at Early Start and have the pleasure of leading up this new Starting Early initiative that has a twofold focus on workforce development and advocacy. And specifically around the workforce development piece, the goal is to not only build out our internal capacity here at Early Start, but to also do so in the larger early childhood ecosystem within the Kansas City region. And what we envision that process will look like will be essentially creating a centralized repository of workforce development programs and projects that we develop internally, but also that are in place with community partners so that there's some synergy around the professional development pathways that exist, and that there's more clarity for individuals as they try to navigate through systems to upskill and to be more professionally qualified. So there are multiple projects that are embedded within Starting Early and the Early Learning Career Academy that essentially provide support for individuals who are currently in the workforce, those who have an interest in joining the workforce, and those who are at the very beginning stages of having those initial conversations about career planning and engagement. So at our middle and high school career fair engagement level. And so essentially what we're looking at is trying to build out a backwards professional design of meeting individuals where they're at, but also reflecting on where there's an essential need to have programming at specific entry points so that individuals have opportunities to enter the field early, to upskill early, and to be on a professional trajectory that is seamless. And so to do that, we want to revisit some of the programs that have worked well in the past in Kansas City. So the development or the redevelopment of child development associate training cohort groups, as well as some new programming and innovative practice in the form of early childhood registered apprentice programs. So that's not something that we currently have within the region. And we have multiple partnerships, one significantly with the Full Employment Council to build out this early childhood registered apprentice component. So the ability to have individuals learn while they're earning a living wage in an early childhood program. Our CDA cohort groups are already in works. We have one full cohort that is in process right now. We're building out our second cohort, and we hope to have 4 of those over the course of this year with a total of at least 30 participants. And so we've got 10 in our first cohort group as it is now. And these cohort groups will be a combination of community-based participants who are already working across early childhood programs and those individuals who are interested in joining the field. We're also, like Raina mentioned, the Metro Center will be used for a lot of this training and development. And what we have in the works is an innovation that we hope will be useful to not only our teachers, but those in the community as well. And it's this classroom of possibilities idea, which is an interactive model classroom that assists with teacher training and development. This initiative cannot just be done internally. So we have multiple partners within the general workforce, higher education, and other early childhood community-based organizations, as well as multiple funders. In our backwards professional design, our starting point is really middle and high school students. And so we're currently working on developing a middle and high school summer intensive program that is able to help those high school students lead into a certified CDA pathway. And lastly, it's not just about the development of teachers, it's about the development of all of those auxiliary fields that are related to early care and education, and specifically around center directors and making sure that there are more sustained leadership and administration training opportunities and pathways.
And now we will go off of the screen share and have an actual conversation with all of you and allow you to react to the information and ask us any questions, offer us any feedback and suggestions that you might have to help support us. Really what I call 23-24 as it relates to Metro Center and our classroom operations. It's our year to rebuild and restart. Metro Center had a really rocky start in the first place. Just a few months after we opened, the pandemic hit. And so it has never gotten to full operations. And we've had experienced quite a bit of turnover in leadership just because of the real challenges that many leaders experienced dealing with COVID. And you might ask, well, wait a minute, isn't EarlystART's mission in the urban core? Why are you closing Metro? Why wouldn't you consider closing North? It's so far away. As you saw on the slide, the enrollment and the staffing at North is actually more solid than Metro is right now. Metro has had a real challenge of attracting and retaining teachers. And so it is our intention, though, to really spend from now to the end of the year, really being very realistic for the long term about where our footprint really is realistically going to be able to operate. And, you know, I think it's not a secret to anyone on this call. We're not sure if the Northland is EarlystART's home for lots of different reasons. And our love and our passion is the center of the city. And Metro is by far a more attractive facility than our Northland facility is in the first place. And it also has much greater capacity. There's about capacity for about 50 more children at Metro than there is at the North Center. But in the short term, we needed to work through what we thought would be the most realistic for the short term while we figure out what the long-term plan is. Our goal as of today is after this year to have all 3 of our facilities operating again. But every day brings something different. And so we continue to pivot and look at ways. I'd be remiss if I didn't point out Clyde McQueen, who just was able to join. We will be partnering with the Full Employment Council in the development of the Registered Apprenticeship Program. This is the first time since I have been at Early Start that the general workforce has leaned in like this to help support the training and development of early childhood educators. And so, Clyde, I don't know if you want to speak briefly to your funding and support of our work.
Well, obviously, our whole approach is to work with persons like Deidre. We don't have that much experience in the childcare sector, quite frankly, because it never paid enough. And so that's what our objective is to increase the career pathway where people will be attracted and generate more slots. And that way increase our childcare capacity, because there's many, with the predominance of families with kids under the age of 18, 51% of those families are single parent households across all socioeconomic groups. So given that, the only way that we can staff all of these companies is to increase labor market participation among those single parent families. And the first thing that everybody talks about is, I can't go off and leave my kid at home. And the only way you can do that is to make sure that they have affordable childcare, available and affordable, which we also have that as a challenge. So we've been talking about it a lot. And so we have gotten some movement. That's why we need persons like Deidre and yourselves, because we do not have a clue about the whole career pathway. And so we are not going to try to learn it all over in 10 minutes. We got to rely on persons like yourself and the network to help us be able to accommodate it. And hopefully we also going to be talking with the HHS administration about the whole Head Start and looking at how we can get have a whole system to increase both the pay levels and everything else, so we can become attractive to those persons to free up the slots that we need for the families that we're trying to serve. So it impacts everything, not just early childhood. This position impacts all sectors, manufacturing, healthcare, IT, because in our region, we are 24/7. We are not just 8 to 5. And that is very, very important if we continue to sustain all the growth and economic expansion that we have. I mean, my office is filled today. Everybody says people don't want to work. It is filled today with a lot of people wanting to work. So we look forward to working with the Head Start, all of you core anchors, the childcare industry, to help us better enable them to be successful and to create a career pathway and to increase labor market participation among these families. So we look forward to, excited about it. But we got to know we got Deidre and others and people like you be in our corner, because this has been pretty new to us. And so that's why we wanted to do an apprenticeship based approach. So thank you, Deidre.
Thanks, Clyde. Anyone have comments, questions? You know, what FEC is doing is actually creating a different recruitment pathway for us, the general labor market, which that's a tough one. You know, Indeed and LinkedIn and the other mechanisms are pretty saturated. Man, I know all of you well. You're not a quiet group. There's nothing off limits. So thanks, Beth. Go on ahead.
I'm going to jump in. First of all, it was a great presentation, very compelling. But I think one of the things we learned through the KCTR School Smart partnership that we had is that throwing money does not always work. The reason you only got 2 people is because KCTR couldn't get applicants. And as funders, we're hearing that all over the place. So I guess, you know, I don't want to say the $1 million question, because that's the wrong term to use if you're a funder, but what do you need? How can funding help? Do you know what you need and what you need it for?
It's a great question, Beth. I think the first thing I'll say is that I think in the next 30 to 60 days, June and I will have more specificity to the recruitment dollar needs that we have. The state does have some recruiting dollars that are available through their relief dollars, but it is not going to be sufficient. I know that having advertising dollars, having more robust marketing and materials that are available to allow us to lean out, having funding available for traveling expenses to go to some of the places that we need to send teachers and HR to visit. Those are immediate needs, I'd say. I would also and that's on the attracting the talent we need. But I would also, in the vein of just our operating expenses, are more significant than many other early childhood providers because of the quality standard that EarlystART has set. And we have not compromised, and I can't compromise that. If it means we have to say, guess what? In this labor market, we can only operate one center to get to our level of quality, then that's what we would do. But compromising the arts integration, the behavior intervention supports that we provide, that's why our expenses often are probably higher than you see from some of your other requests. And so, but that's what that EarlystART apart and always has. I'd be happy any of my other team members think of immediate needs that you see that we have in the way of funding. I actually think putting some pressure on Teach for America and Kansas City Teacher Residency to come to the table in a more coordinated fashion and think differently about how we develop the more highly qualified and certified teacher pathway in early childhood. It is not the same as K-12, and it has to be thought of differently, which is a part of what our vision for starting early in our academy is.
Deidre, so I do think there is some, I don't know if it's a distinct difference, because the good thing about this project being in St. Louis and Kansas City, we can know what some of the reimbursement rates are and why there's a difference. And the one thing that I've noticed, and since this is going to be a joint project in Kansas City and St. Louis, we are working jointly since we're the fiduciary for both of them. Why are the reimbursement rates, or why are some of the wage rates higher in St. Louis than they are in Kansas City when they're both coming through the same HHS department? That's something I don't understand. If you do it in St. Louis, then why can't you do the same thing in Kansas City? If they're reimbursing childhood advocates, child development associates at $18 an hour or $17, which is what I've heard, and I talked with them last week, then why can't we get the same reimbursement rate here in Kansas City? Because I think that would at least create more of an incentive for people to go, because that's the first thing people ask us is, how much is it going to pay and what's the career pathway? And so why is there a difference?
Well, I can tell you, you have the Urban League in St. Louis that administers their grant. We have Mid-America Regional Council, and we don't set our Head Start reimbursement rates. That's set through the grantee. So if we wanted, and the reimbursement rate does directly impact the wages you're able to pay. And so the only way that I could anticipate that Mark would change the reimbursement rate is if they reduce the number of spaces that they're funding. And so we don't have anyone from Mark on here, but that might be a follow-up conversation we might want to consider having about, even if it's not changing the structure of the Head Start grant, how and in what way could Mark or others come together to allow us to come to a higher level. So we're at, is Raina still on here? Raina, what's our, for a CDA entry level? It's roughly 17, is it 1750?
Our CDA level is $15 an hour.
I thought the CDA was, the 15 was for the not credentialed.
No, it's for both.
So is that a rate that's set by the feds or is that a rate set by the grantee?
The wages for people is set by the employer. And so based on our reimbursement rate that we get for public funding, if our CFO would have been able to join us, she'd tell you that the numbers wouldn't match if we went too incredibly high. And keep in mind, before the board approved it, we had some in our agency that were making about $12.60 an hour. The average rate for childcare workers across the state of Missouri is $12.50. So I think that until there's some additional local public advocacy around this issue, you're going to continue to see those wages be a challenge.
So I've talked to our congressman about it, and I've also talked to some senators about it, some of whom have, matter of fact, we talked to a senator at our last chamber trip. He was a Kansas side, and he brought up Head Start as a way to expand childcare. So is there anything that can be done at the federal level? Because I know they just got hit. I know that there was a $30 billion addition or something like that in childcare in the last federal budget. So is there anything from a Fed public policy that either us or the Chamber of Commerce could get behind? And
they just did a cost of living adjustment that was a little higher than I'd seen it before, not probably high enough to warrant the increased wages. But I will say, in addition to our, what Mark has done well is they have provided retention dollars. And so we've been able to do a $3 an hour retention bonus every quarter. I think we just went through the last of that. So I don't think there's any current authorization for that to continue.
Okay.
Is there any, you and I need to, we probably need to go to DC together or something.
Well, I just was wondering if it was the reimbursement rate that was tied to HHS. And I know that in St. Louis, when we announced this, as we did here, that the HHS administrator, not the local one, who actually lives in St. Louis, but is based here in Kansas City, is going to be with us. And so I was just wondering if there was anything from a public policy standpoint that they could do that would help you all get, because I think what's going to have to happen is, in order for you to attract more people, there definitely is going to have to be everybody's asking the question, how much will I make and how much will I keep, how can I grow in the field? That's the question that we're getting from everyone. And we have a lot of major employers who have changed their whole hiring patterns based upon what it takes. I know one increased the wage right here in our shop by $3, went from temporary to full-time, did it right on the spot. And automatically they hired we had 500 people show up just because of that. So I think people do pay attention to that. And the more that we articulate that, the more you're going to have, positions. So if you've got all of these positions, these slots, but that are on field, but it's based upon, a rate that's below par, then maybe they need to, put more in the slots, and we advocate for more slots nationally at a higher rate. Because it has caught on now. I think if that's what we need to do and articulate it, then that's what we need to do at the federal level, and have them say this should be an option that's available to Head Start system wherever they are, period.
Right.
And that's a public policy. It's not a discretionary decision.
Mm-hmm.
Deidre,
Yeah.
I have a question for you, and this kind of builds on the policy issues, because, I think obviously we need to and should pay specific and particular attention to supporting our centers. But I think where we lose sight of is thinking more long-term in terms of strategies around advocacy, kind of building on what Clyde said. So I know one of the challenges that all of the education centers have is competing with school districts for teachers. And it's not just pay. Obviously, if you are an early education teacher in a K-12 system, you're also part of the retirement system. So my question is there any, and I know that, you know, the challenge a lot of times for funders is that's a long game strategy that's hard for funders to really think about. But my question is, so we tend not to fund those advocacy efforts. My question is there a concerted effort to try to kind of pull out maybe some of these specific, you know, in addition to reimbursement level, but also to think about, like, is there a way, like, what would the mechanism need to be? What would need to change in order for early education teachers in, let's just say, we could say NACE accredited centers, you know, you could come up with some standard, but to be able to also participate in the state retirement system. Is there anyone looking at that and thinking through what would need to happen for that to be an option?
I just brought it up yesterday with CBiz, who's actually our broker, about how you create the critical mass, even on the traditional benefits side of it. We pay close to $1 million a year to provide a robust healthcare plan to our staff. Having those dollars back into our budget would make it easier for us to increase the wages of employees. And so I haven't seen, I know, I think Casey Hansen was on the call from Kids Win, Missouri. We did have a call statewide looking at ways that we could look at some of the benefit structure. And I know the Missouri Chamber has taken this on as one of their issues. I think somebody way smarter than I am that works in insurance and policy would probably, I know that what the woman from CBiz told me yesterday is that it's not as easy as you think. And there's a lot of legal barriers and hurdles that have to be overcome. But if we could get some law firm, you know, a couple of law firms or people to take this on to help us study it a little closer, I do think there are some other communities that have done some innovative things like that. Or if there was a creative way for us to fall under the non-certified teacher retirement system in the district, I don't know a way to do it because we're not considered an LEA. So. Great comments and thoughts. Anyone else? I know there's several of you that are not on the screen. You can feel free to take yourself off mute too if you have a comment or question.
I'll chime in real fast if that's all right, Deidre.
Please.
I was thinking just about your question earlier, Beth, about what can funders do, and particularly on this call, there are incredible civic leadership represented. And so being able to advocate for this issue in spaces that we're not directly in would be really helpful because it's beyond a childcare issue. It's workforce development. It's a civil rights issue. It transcends boundaries that have existed for forever. And so being able to folks that we're not privy to be with all the time, I think sharing the significant need and the barrier that it is causing for so many families to not only reach their personal, their professional, but their personal successes and achievements would be helpful. And then again, director of development hat on, with the consolidation, we're not serving any less children. In fact, we are serving more than we currently are this school year. So while it might seem like a closure, that's really not what is happening. We're consolidating programs to fully staff two great centers that we have. And so continuing that sustainable support. I know you said beyond money, but money is how we work, how we operate. So continuing to support organizations, not only EarlystART, but others that find themselves in similar situations, as so many are, as we saw in those first couple of slides, is to continue to invest in places like EarlystART, who are doing good work, who are trying to recruit the best and the brightest, who have a heart for this work, and make it compelling, because right now it's not. We have to figure out what that magic equation is to get folks interested in this field and then be able to pay them a livable wage for it. That's all I got.
Can I ask a question? Can I ask how
Yeah.
you guys are supporting your families through the consolidation, your families that were at the Metro Center, kind of helping them, I mean, physically get to,
Yeah.
but then just acclimate to St. Mark?
Absolutely. Great question, Rebecca. So this is the time of year the kids are getting ready to graduate and go to kindergarten. So we have a large number of children that will be through attrition leaving us. And so that reduced the number of children that were currently at Metro that would need a placement for the next school year. So all of the children, unless there was only a couple of families that had some barriers. One was beyond us, another was because they had an older child enrolled at another facility, so they opted to transfer. But we are having an open house that allows them to go over and actually get to know the facility, meet their teachers, and get better acquainted at the new center before they actually start. They had 6 or 8 weeks where they're allowed to, more than 6 or 8 weeks, probably about closer to 3 months notice, where they can begin having the conversations with their children to prepare them for moving over. As you go back to that current slide, we only have about 50 children at Metro right now anyway. And so between the children that are going to kindergarten, Raina, can you remind me how many kids it is that will actually be moving over? But we also, Raina could talk too about how we intentionally work to place at least one of their current teachers in the classroom that they're moving to, which is not an easy thing to do.
No, we only have about 15 children that will actually be going to St. Mark because the majority of our children right now are in a charter classroom, so they'll be graduating. So it'll be about 15.
And I think one of the other things too is Chris is here with School Smart, and we're really appreciative for the support we've gotten with pre-K cooperative in our charter classrooms. But this year we took a pause on Head Start, and we were fortunate that they continued to provide funding and we didn't lose the slots, and that was allowable through the federal government. That's not going to be allowable as we move forward. And if we give those slots up, we can never get them back again. And so that contract was in place long before our partnership with the charter schools. And so we're just putting a pause with 2 of our partners, which was Citizens of the World and University Academy. And Chris worked like magic and got them other homes to enroll their children. But then as we move forward, we'll look to rebuild those partnerships as we have the teacher bandwidth to do so. I think that I still feel like I'm a new person to early childhood, even though I've been here for almost 11 years. And you have folks on this call that have been funding and working in the early childhood space a lot longer than I have. Jim McDonald, Denise, both of you, I know have been doing this for a long time. And honestly, a lot of what we are working on under Starting Early in our Early Learning Career Academy, it's not new stuff. We're bringing back things that we stopped funding. And so I think the other message here is that until we figure out how to bring more revenue into the early care and education space, which unfortunately with that tax that didn't pass, and it might not have been the right mechanism, but until we have some more stable funding in this area, this is not, it's just a big issue that we've not as a community figured out how we're going to work to address. And my fear is that you're going to see more dominoes fall in the strain on operations. You know, Raina's supposed to support the 3 of the centers. She's currently the director at Metro Center. You know what I mean? It's not that she minds running the building, but the other work that she has to do doesn't stop. Meryl too has been running North Center all year long, and she's supposed to be training and developing our teachers and working with our coaches. And so, you know, it's really been challenging. So it's just great to have you all here. I don't get nervous talking very often, And I'm not gonna lie, this was not a call I was looking forward to having today and sending that communication out to anyone. It's just, I think my team will tell you, we made the decision at the 9th of hours that we could, because we've been trying to figure out what and how to handle the attrition. I see you, Jim, and then Denise.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I just want to say that I appreciate your transparency. Because here's what we know. We know that that what you are sharing with us and the challenges that you're having, every early childhood center is having. And we know that there is, that one of the things that we as funders need to make sure that we do is that we are really leaning into building trusting relationships so that people can have, or the organizations that we want to support can have these kinds of honest and transparent conversations with us without the fear that made you nervous coming into this call. Because like I said, we know every center is having these same issues. Some of them just don't want to, aren't being as transparent in sharing those issues for fear of repercussions. So I think from my perspective, one of the things that I think it's important for everybody on this call that supports EarlystART to do is to make sure that as we're out moving through the community, when we hear people that are uninformed talking about what's happening at EarlystART as being closing, shrinking, which, as you've shared with us, is not what's happening. You are consolidating your services in ways that are really fiscally smart and will allow you to sustain and grow in the future. That I think one of the things that all of us on this call really need to make a commitment to you, Deidre, to do is to make sure that we are also your ambassadors, informing people and making sure that people understand that you are serving the same, if not more, numbers of kids. You're just doing it in really fiscally smart ways.
Thanks, Denise. Jim?
Oh, well, I had something to say very much along the same lines as Denise, but she said it a lot better than I would have been able to. I think when those of us who heard the news about Metro Center closing was a little bit of a gut punch. And so having this context is super helpful. And I feel like I'm much better prepared to be an ambassador, as Denise suggests. Essentially, your organization stepped up to continue services in a center that one of the most well-resourced organizations in the city was not able to make work financially during better times from a workforce and economic standpoint time. And so, it's encouraging to me here that you're going to redeploy that space in a meaningful way during this interim period. And, I've got every confidence that that you'll be serving kids again there, when we get through this period. I don't have any ideas about solutions to the challenges. These are really existential ones that spill over into domains well outside of, the challenges of providing quality early learning. But just really appreciate the transparency as well, and definitely feel like I'll be able to sort of be an ambassador for you all in the community.
Well, I guess 10 or 11 years into it, y'all know me by now, so that might help a little bit. It is, I think, especially if anyone who knows me knows I lead from the intention of wanting to do good in this community. And so I'm exhausted. And I think my voice is a symptom of all that. And so I just appreciate you all. But I would say this.
I do have a question. Are the other centers using the Start Early organization, the platform, to get training? Because, I think funders are asked to respond to everybody's emergencies at different times. So is this packaged in such a way that it's a collaborative early childhood effort where if a funder was able to come in and help, they're not just helping you, but they're helping, the space, the early childhood space in general. So tell me how many of the other centers are benefiting from this as well?
So great question, Beth. So Asia is the only employee of Starting Early right now. Let me just start there. She started in August and in a very short period of time has done a really great job to move from concept to actual implementation. The theory in mind with the entire model is to collaborate with every kind of provider in whatever kind of way we can. If I'm very honest with you, Beth, many of the cohort sites with partner organizations, because of their stress and strain of already being low staffed, can't see the forest through the trees to get Athia and I what we need to get other cohorts going. What I would encourage, if you get other workforce development related grants, requests, is ask them, are you already partnering with EarlystART? Are you already partnering with the Full Employment Council? Deborah Mann has also got some funding to do some things. What I can tell you is Deborah, Clyde, and I will be fist to glove and looking at who can do what so we can spread the dollars as wide and as deep as we possibly can and work with as many providers as are available. But anyone who's needing the training and development is available to operate under EarlystART. I have always been a collaborative leader, probably a little too collaborative at times at the expense of my own organization. But we want all children to have access to a high quality teacher, not just those at EarlystART. And so thanks to All Family Foundation for being the first major funder to support this getting started. It's really in its pilot phase, but over time, you will see cohort and teacher training sites available at multiple locations, multiple providers throughout the community with resources supported from the academy.
And I would just say one thing to add that you may not see on the front end of this is that, you know, this program has a deep commitment to removing as many systemic barriers as possible for participants. And so a part of that process is providing resources in the form of stipends for childcare and transportation and tech resources that other funding streams may not have the capacity to do. So when we think about starting early and where it fits, it goes back to that central repository. We want everybody to come into that space and pool the resources that they have and to be more fiscally responsible about making sure that we're not providing overlapping services for a lot of the grants and resources that are out there. So we don't need 10 providers all doing CDA training. So if the CDA training is already happening, what's the gap that we can fill to make sure that individuals are able to persist through those programs? And so one of the foundational components of the system that we're building is this idea of ongoing mentorship. So we've committed to the process of making sure that every individual who participates in the Starting Early programs is able to have one-on-one mentorship with field professionals to help them with navigation and again, persistence through the program. That also allows for us to create some of these adjacent professional opportunities. So when we're talking about building a system, it's not just those nuts and bolts programs of CDAs, AAs, and bachelor's degrees. It's those other professional experiences of allowing a teacher to broaden her professional development by becoming a mentor or a CDA cohort advisor or an adjunct instructor, so that we are expanding the fields in both traditional and non-traditional ways.
Anyone with other comments or questions? Oh, are you trying to say something, Michelle? I couldn't tell if you were trying to say something. Okay, so if there aren't other comments or questions, what I can say is that if you're interested and then leaning in further into what we all knew before the call, but probably had an even bigger magnifying lens placed on is there's some larger systemic policy and advocacy related issues. And if you are willing to be a part of an advisory group or work group that is helping us really think more broadly, particularly around this wage issue, I have a vision. I don't know how it's going to get funded or how it's going to get materialized, but it's called the Kansas City Early Childhood Teacher Fund. I don't know where it's getting funded, how we're going to fund it, but on the backs of early childhood providers going to that $17, $19 an hour CDA level teacher, they can't afford it, and not in the long term. And so, we've gotten relief dollars, but we need to be thinking more long term about how anything we create today is around 10, 20 years from now when all of us have retired and left the field of early learning. So you can feel free to reach out to myself, and I can get you connected with who on the team could keep you connected. I also know where all of you are, and some of you that ask some really great questions might get voluntold at some point. So great. Early literacy training, absolutely, Lauren, and you and Raina probably would be speaking the same language around early literacy and how critically important that is, because the readers of tomorrow are created in our centers today. So, well, thank you very much for being here. You cornered 25 minutes back into your day, unless you just want to stay on and chat longer.